Welcome everyone to the Kentucky Kid. I'm your host, Kelly Berry. Thank you for joining me here today. As we all are aware, Mother's Day was last Sunday, and every Mother's Day it almost seems like the number one thing that's advertised outside of those chocolate arrangements are the arrangement of flowers. And interesting story, whenever I was young, about 6 or 7 years old, I had no idea what the difference between like a flower was and your typical weed. I just knew that women, specifically mothers, liked flowers, especially flowers from their kids. And so me and my older brother, who was about 8 or 9 at the time, I was 7, he was 9, went out and picked what we thought were flowers from a field, put them in a vase with water, gave them to Mom for Mother's Day. It was ragweed, and we were all sneezing for the next 2 weeks. One person, though, that I can think of in the world of sports that would probably like to send some ragweed home to his mother is Kobe Bryant. Now, Kobe Bryant is in a court case with his mother because she apparently sold some of his personal effects from his early days in high school and his early days in the NBA. Some personal memorabilia that was, just as the name suggests, very personal to him. She claims that he gave her permission to sell the items, and she ended up selling them to an auction firm. He claims that he never told her that and now wants his stuff back, and I believe that the auction has been put on hold as of now. But a couple of the items that were in this transaction include, but aren't limited to, game-worn high school uniforms from Lower Merion High School, the NBA championship ring from the year 2000, high school letters again from Lower Merion High School, and then his high school championship ring from 1996. Now, all of this stuff is very, 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 very collectible, but especially the stuff from high school, because there aren't that many things from professional athletes, especially in the world of the NBA, that come from earlier days, especially in high school. And so a lot of diehard Lakers fans, a lot of diehard Kobe Bryant fans, or just basketball fans in general would love to have some high school jerseys. So I can see why this stuff would be very, very valuable to both collectors and to the auction firm. I forget what the auction firm name was specifically, but I think it's based out in New Jersey or something like that. But I can also see Kobe's side, where if he did in fact not ever give his mom permission to sell the stuff, that he would want some stuff back. I mean, I have my high school jersey and I wouldn't sell that to anybody. That's personal effects, that's personal memorabilia. There are a lot of memories involved with that uniform. But I just think that among all of the other things you can take away from this story, the biggest thing is just how many dysfunctional relationships is Kobe Bryant really in. I mean, Shaq in one interview didn't even acknowledge his existence. Dwight Howard's relationship with him and Kobe Bryant on the court has just been abysmal. And he may even be done with the Lakers, and it's just, I'm kind of torn because I've never been a Kobe Bryant fan personally, but I've always enjoyed his game. And it hurts to see a guy with his talent have so many off-the-court issues. But keeping it within the LA Laker organization, Phil Jackson has basically come out and said that he wants to come back into the NBA. And for a while, a lot of people assumed that that was going to be coaching. Recently, he's voiced that he really, really wants an office job. And while he may not be objecting to coaching per se, if he was going to coach, he would want a Pat Riley-esque type of job where he coaches, but he also has a lot of influence in the office. Look, the guy's won 11 championships coaching. I mean, he can't really prove anything more coaching the game in the NBA. What he can prove is that he can, in fact, build a team from a managerial standpoint, and that's what he wants to do. He wants his next challenge. The problem for him is the only teams that are really interested in him as a manager are teams like Toronto, teams like Charlotte, your bottom feeder teams. And it'll be interesting to see whether he's willing to take the risk of going to one of those lesser teams to have a new challenge, because even though that's what he wants to do, I'm sure that just like almost every other person in any profession, he wants to succeed. And Toronto and Charlotte and bottom feeder teams don't really provide that opportunity. But speaking of bottom feeder teams, I think one of the things that the NBA needs more than anything else is just a lower level team to be good. When Vince Carter was at Toronto, it was nice to have a lower market team be good. Right? They weren't ever great. They never won a finals whenever he was there, at least not to my knowledge. But it was nice to see a lower market team succeed. Right now, the only teams that are really successful as far as the franchise is concerned over an extended period of time or of late have been the Heat, the Celtics, the Thunder, the Spurs, and the Lakers. Okay, outside of that, there have been spotty success, but there hasn't really been any kind of consistency. That's why teams like Memphis, teams like Golden State, Indiana need to start being good on a consistent basis, because if you're not in one of these major markets, Miami, Boston, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, LA, unless you're a diehard fan of the game, you're not really going to care that much about the NBA. The NBA needs a market outside of just your major 5 or 6 teams that are good every single year. That's why I hope that teams like Golden State and Memphis continue to succeed for years to come. And given their rosters, given their age of those rosters, I don't see any reason why that can't happen. Speaking of those two teams, they're both in the NBA playoffs, and unlike what Charles Barkley said about the first round of the NBA playoffs, as you may or may not remember, he said that this is probably going to be talking about the first round of the NBA playoffs. This is going to be the worst round in NBA playoff history. He was right. It was just absolutely terrible, and pretty much outside of the series between the Nets and the Bulls, virtually unwatchable. There was a slight bit of interest whenever Boston won 2 games in a row and nearly pulled out Game 6 against the Knicks, but other than that, I mean, the Heat and the Bucks was a complete snooze fest. Other than Russell Westbrook getting hurt against the Thunder, that series was pitiful. But now you have 4 series that in their first 2 games were splits. Starting with Golden State and San Antonio. Golden State is basically 4.5 minutes away from being up 2-0 in this series. They cough up a 16-point lead in the fourth quarter in Game 1 and end up losing that game in double overtime, 129-127. This series is characterized entirely by the youth of San Antonio versus the youth of Golden State versus the experience of San Antonio. Normally, in virtually every other sport, I would say experience trumps youth and energy. But in a 7-game series that's following an 82-game season, look, everybody's tired. But it's the older guys that it tends to affect more, because the longer you play, the more tired you get. And older guys start out the season more tired anyway, and they get more and more fatigued as the season goes on. But Golden State has an 8-man roster, and 3 of those guys are rookies. San Antonio's team is going to be on welfare here in a couple of years. They have 3 guys in their starting 8 rotation that are over 33 years old. Matt Bonner's 33, Manu Ginobili I think is 35, and Tim Duncan's 37. Tony Parker's 30 years old too, so very, very, very old team. Golden State, for being as young as they are, I think they've shown a lot of maturity in this series. Game 1, they went on the road, hostile environment, and dominated the game for 43.5 minutes. I mean, like I said, they were up 16 points on the road in the fourth quarter and ended up coughing up that lead. A lot of teams, when placed in that situation, may come out flat in Game 2, especially a young team. And especially a young team who just went through that in Game 1 and then went through the same exact scenario in Game 2. Because Game 2 had the exact same plot line as Game 1. Golden State gets a big lead, and in the fourth quarter, late, here comes San Antonio back. Now, I played on a lot of bad teams in my career, especially in high school, and every time we started getting our butts handed to us again, we would come over to the bench after a timeout or after a break or halftime or something, and everybody would seem to have the mindset of, here we go again. Defeated attitude. Golden State didn't have that. They had the maturity to come out and continue to fight in the fourth quarter in a hostile environment on the road, experiencing the exact same experience that ended up losing Game 1 for them. With all of that said, considering Golden State's youth, their dominance over this series for all but 4.5 minutes, I think Golden State ends up winning this series in probably 6 games, if not fewer. Moving on, keeping it in the West, though, Oklahoma City and Memphis. Now, this series is a question of, can Kevin Durant score in abundance? Now, in the first 2 games, he scored 36 and 35 respectively. That was good enough for them to squeak out a Game 1 win, and then they ended up losing Game 2 by 6. The Thunder need, more than anything else at this point, a number 2 scorer. Before Russell Westbrook went down, that wasn't a problem. Russell Westbrook came in, I forget what he averaged over the course of the season, but he was a very, very good scorer throughout the season and into the playoffs. At least until he got hurt against Houston. But Ibaka, who has been known to be a decent scorer of late in his career, hasn't been a factor. In Game 1, he shot 1 of 10, and he's only averaged 8 points in the first 2 games. He has to step up. Guys like Thabo Sefolosha have to step up. Kenyon Martin needs to play well. He scored, how much did he score? And I think he had 25 in the Game 1 win. Okay, they need guys like that to score the ball. Now, they had Derek Fisher score 19 in Game 2. The problem with Derek Fisher being the second scorer is he's such a liability on defense that anything he does offensively from a production standpoint is canceled out by the fact that he can't guard anybody on the other end of the court. So they need guys like Ibaka, like Sefolosha, like Martin to come in and play both sides of the ball well, but score offensively and at least take a little bit of the load off of Kevin Durant. With all of that said, I still think that Oklahoma City is the better team in this series, and I'm going to say that they end up winning this game, or winning this series in 7 games. So in the West, I have Golden State winning in 6, Oklahoma City winning in 7. That would be an entertaining series in and of itself with Curry against Durant, but that's purely speculation at this point. Moving on to the series that are already in existence, the East, New York and Indiana is a 2 versus a 3, and then Miami and Chicago is a 1 versus a 5. Starting with the Knicks and Pacers. Indiana stole Game 1 on the road, 92-85. And then New York comes back and just hammers the Pacers in Game 2, 105-78. But despite those 2 games, with Indiana dominating Game 1, and then the Knicks dominating Game 2, this could be a series that goes all the way to 7 games without any individual game being that close or being played that close from a score standpoint or a momentum standpoint. One of the stats that alarms me more than anything else in this series has been J.R. Smith's ineffectiveness. Now remember, he had a comment after Game 4, or Game 5. Like, which game was it? It was Game 4 against the Celtics, where if they won that game, they would have swept the Celtics and moved on into round 2 easily. He set out that game, and he said that if he was going to play, or if he could have played in that game, then the Knicks would have won without question. Since that comment, the dude has been a complete non-factor. He's shot 7 of 30 in this series so far. As long as he remains a non-factor, I just don't see them winning this series. Carmelo Anthony is a good scorer in his own right. The problem with him, though, is that he needs team involvement around him. Unlike guys like LeBron James and Kevin Durant, good scorers that can work in isolation, Carmelo Anthony can't really do that. He needs good ball movement, he needs the defense to move around, and then he scores. Then he shoots. He can't just break down a guy in front of him that consistently. So as long as guys like J.R. Smith, who's the team's third best scorer in points per game, continue to be a non-factor, I don't think the Knicks have enough firepower to keep up with and overtake the Pacers over a 7-game stretch. I have the Pacers winning this one in 6. Finally, Miami and Chicago. The first 2 games of this series told us very, very little. At least that which we didn't already know. A lot of people freaked out like none other. Okay, it was almost as much freaking out as over the Boston Marathon, where Miami lost game 1. And I understand that you kind of get a little harried whenever the best team in the country by far loses a game. Keep in mind, though, that the Miami Heat had an 8-day layoff from their past game against the Bucks to this one. They were going to be rusty, all right? They shot less than 40% from the field. Despite that horrible offensive performance, they almost won this game and were leading this game in the fourth quarter. And the only reason they didn't win this game was because Nate Robinson had some late game heroics. The Bulls went on a 10-0 run late in the game to end up winning 93-86. The second game was all about the Heat coming back in full force. They had shaken off the rust, and they were utterly ticked off at the Bulls. And they ended up winning that game by 37. They shot 60% from the field. All right, what these first 2 games tell me, more than anything else, is that this series is going to be entirely dictated based upon the Heat play. If they play well, they're going to win. If they play decently, they're probably still going to win. Because the Bulls are so banged up. I mean, Heinrich's out for game 3. Rose has been out the entire season, continues to be. And now Luol Deng is out. All right, they are probably the most banged up team in the playoffs. All right, regardless of how well or not well the Bulls play, it's probably not going to be good enough to beat the Heat for any other game in this series. It might go to 6 if Chicago gets lucky. I think, though, it probably ends in 5. But speaking of Chicago, Derrick Rose hasn't played all season, and especially after the Game 1 win, there was a lot of criticism on his part, or toward him at least, where, and the question continues to pop up, should he or should he not come back? One of the things that I think is needing to be addressed that hasn't really been. All right, and before I say this, let me just preface it by saying that Derrick Rose is a phenomenal player. One of, if not the best point guards in the country. All right, he's up there with the likes of Chris Paul. Until Rondo got hurt, he was up there with Rondo. And just a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal player. But he hasn't played all season. Okay? Did we all see how much rust the Heat had after an 8-day layoff? Imagine how much rust you would have in the case of Derrick Rose if you haven't played for an entire season. If he came back, not only would he not be mentally prepared, he's made that abundantly clear. All right, he's cleared from a medical standpoint, but he's not mentally ready. If he came back and decided he was going to play, not only would he not be mentally ready, but he would be so rusty from a physical standpoint that it would not be worth it. He would probably be be worse than Nate Robinson. Because keep in mind, the team's gotten used to playing without him. The coaches have gotten used to playing without him. And suddenly throw him in now, that probably messes up the team chemistry more than it potentially corrects it. And I just see more problems resulting from this than potential solutions to the Bulls. And let's face it, even if he did come back in full strength right now, it still wouldn't be good enough to beat the Heat. So I just don't see any point and purpose to doing this. As I said, spring semester's over, summer break's getting ready to start. Thank God. The only bad news about that is I'm not going to have anything to record the show with, and so until the fall, we're going to have a layoff and you won't be seeing me. I'm thinking about starting a blog, though. If you check the Facebook fan pages and Twitter fan pages, I'll have more information on that, just to kind of give you all some ideas of what I'm thinking about over the summer, whether it be sports ideas or anything else. But I'll let you all know that later on. But until next time, and this next time is going to be a little bit further away than we're used to seeing, take care, God bless everybody, enjoy your summer.